Remember back during the tail end of 2023, when the YouTuber MrBeast was garnering headlines across the world for what appeared to be a genuinely amazing philanthropic achievement, the drilling of 100 wells in Africa, bringing fresh water to the communities that needed it the most. Well, the world was full of praise for MrBeast back then, when he was still considered to be a genuinely good human being before one too many leaks emerged from the back end. Well, I will hold up my hand and say as well that I was one of the people who had praise for this, and who guffawed at the accusations of, "Oh, you silly white person, this is just a white colonial savior complex and it'll never work." Like, what do you mean? How could there be anything wrong with drilling water wells in Africa? Well, a year and a half later, the majority of the wells are abandoned, non-functioning, or simply having fallen into a dilapidated state after lack of maintenance. Meaning that, actually, in the not even particularly long term, this turns out to have been nothing more than a vanity exercise. It provided a well going, "Hey, look at this, water!" And then, 18 months later, the thing's broken. For once, I'm gonna have to side with the people who go, "You silly Western colonist, you." And see, there's some interesting stuff to talk about around this. So, first and foremost, the source of this is a reposted video here from, I believe it's CPAT News that iHypocrite has reposted. Immediately I was a bit skeptical because iHypocrite has a long and none too proud history of falling for very, very obvious satire. Or reposting it uncritically. As this post here, Limpopo beneficiaries eat 30 cows awarded to them to start farming project. Now, as somebody who is a massive fan of the Empire of Dust, that sounds like something Africa could have done. However, one glance at these cows show you that these aren't meat animals. These aren't ready for a slaughter or to be eaten at any time soon, and I'm not much of a farmer, and even I can see that. And if you actually track down the article in question, South African News Satire. Right there in the headline. So, there is something to be said about uncritically following the headline, but this one is actually backed up by an article from Magati Wadi here, who talks about how there have been several reports, and she should know being from the area, the majority of the wells have been abandoned. Reports from locals, that is, that they're no longer functioning. So, let's have a quick look at this, shall we? 1 year later, MrBeast's charity wells have all been unmaintained. Locals have reported that nearly every well donated by MrBeast has become abandoned. MrBeast provided both the wells and maintenance training to the locals 1 year ago, so they're slightly older. Many claim the Water is Life well initiative was colonial and doomed to failure. And again, I laughed at that. That's nonsense. Of course the local communities are going to be like, we would like to keep water, please. I was wrong. And as we see here now from the article, right, we'll be looking at Magati Wadi said, if MrBeast genuinely wants to help Africa, he could redirect his enormous resources and influence towards enabling African solutions rather than importing Western ones. Immediately, my brain goes, African solutions to getting water out of the ground. You mean digging a hole? As that is actually the African solution to this. So, fun fact, there are dozens upon dozens of charitable organizations whose entire purpose and role in life it is to bring clean water to Africa, to drill wells, to give out hand pumps, to deliver filtration equipment, etc., even training people how to dig their own wells, which is done via shovels at best, or hands at worst, with some examples I've read from these various charitable organizations. But the problem is, whenever this happens, it actually fails. And so this article is actually a pretty good article. It's not as SJW cringe as my knee-jerk reaction immediately thought. So the idea of enabling African solutions is not purely a, oh hey, stop this Western nonsense. Don't you know the shaman can strike the rock and bring forth water? No. She actually means the sensible thing. Listen, if you drill a well in Africa and that's it, then you leave, you fuck off back home to America, then that well will run for a while, until it starts to rust, until the moving parts start falling to pieces, until the African sun, the dust, etc. gets in everywhere, until they run out of filters, until they run out of cleansing chemicals, etc., 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 as there are indeed continuous costs to maintain a well. And even if you train some of the locals to do it, they're not going to pay for it out of their own pocket necessarily. Not to mention, you then need the initiative to actually maintain those wells as well. And this is why I heavily recommend everybody watch Empire of Dust, a brilliant Chinese movie which illustrate the differences in one's work ethic, in essence, one's approach to labor from Africa to Europe and even Asia, as it is an eye-opener, an absolute complete eye-opener as to why we can pour trillions into Africa, such a quantity of money that nobody knows how much we've spent, and still we see no appreciable difference, despite an amount of money that is so large it cannot even be imagined. We can't even see it. We can't notice a difference. It is because of things as you mentioned here. Hand pumps deployed by NGOs in Africa often last less than 5 years. By the mid-2000s, 36% of about 350,000 installed pumps were non-functional, and this number increased to 300,000 abandoned pumps by recent counts. So by the current year, so 20, 30 years in the future, well 20, 25, so not terrible, but by that point, the overwhelming majority of these pumps are broken, abandoned, non-maintained, or otherwise destroyed. And partially, this is because of black people's inability to get to maintaining the shit they're given. It's not a racist point, that is the entire point of Empire of Dust. But another extremely salient point that she brings up is that there isn't any industry to do this. African countries have incredibly corrupt governments. They don't have good laws that allows for industry to be established in the country. And if you don't have anybody in Africa building the pumps, building the filters, and maintaining them as a job, raising funds from the local community or government, then of course they're going to be abandoned. And then the well-meaning white guy comes in yet again and builds a new pump and then feels good about himself, fucks off back home, and in another 5 years, that pump is destroyed, and so on, and so on, and so on. So for once, I can actually see the whole, oh you silly white colonial savior point here. Now, the problem is, it does also come across in this article very much so as, hey, I'm an African entrepreneur, why don't you give me money instead? It does come across as a pinch self-serving, no doubt, especially as the example she brings up is not a very good one. So, the reason why Africa could totally be a, massive financial powerhouse and a center for innovation, the Mauritius miracle. So, Mauritius is a small island nation whose GDP is now reaching the level of European countries. Wow, that's incredible. How could this have been achieved? Clearly, this disproves everything we've seen in Empire of Dust, right? Well, this is Mauritius. Could you perhaps venture a rough guess as to why this place is doing better than the majority of Africa? Why would this region see significant economic growth, do you think? And could it somehow be related to white people and their love of palm trees and warmth? Yes, indeed. Agriculture and industry have become less important to the economy, and services, especially tourism, account for over 72% of Mauritius's GDP. Yeah, exactly. So that's the key problem here. Again, this article brings up excellent points. You do need industry in Africa to support what the NGOs are doing, because dumping a hand pump in the middle of the desert and then fucking off back to Switzerland or whatever isn't actually going to cause any sort of long-term transformation. Or Empire of Dust, like the road built by the Portuguese like 200 years ago, the Chinese then have to come in again 2 centuries later to fix it because nobody maintained it. And this is a mix both of, again, as Empire of Dust demonstrates, a drastically different approach to the value of labor and to maintain what already exists, and indeed due to lacking industry in the countries in question. Because again, if nobody actually produces the stuff you need, all the goodwill in the world will not actually keep that road or that hand pump maintained. But I found this rather amusing because, I mean, this actually does prove that, yes, this was a big thing, but like so much, if not basically all philanthropic activity like this, exists solely to stroke the ego of the person in question. It is to make a group of Europeans or Americans feel good about themselves, whilst wasting, well, at least in this case, his own money. You know, you can't complain too much about a guy using his own money for this stuff. This is still a good act. But you then have corporations, you have countries spending billions, trillions on this, for the exact same reason. So some government drone can for a moment be, I've helped someone. And then it's all completely and utterly useless thereafter. The entire approach when it comes to aid to Africa requires a fundamental re-evaluation from the ground up. And indeed, it is the same fundamental re-evaluation that we need to see in a lot of European countries as well. Norway, which might seem like a slight deviation from Africa, is a wonderful example of this. We have, of course, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, the Oil Fund, which has billions or even trillions of dollars at this point, a ludicrous quantity of cash. What are we doing with this stratospheric amount of dollar bills? Well, we're sitting on it. Or best case scenario. Alternatively, we are investing it in other countries. We are investing it in other countries' corporations, in their infrastructures, in their businesses, rather than in Norwegian ones. And the rest of the money, we're just gonna sit on, hoping that once we eventually run out of oil, we'll be able to survive on this money, which is of course nonsensical. A government devours money by the trillions on a damn near yearly fucking basis. It would keep us alive for a decade or so until we're dirt broke. The actual solution is of course to take that money and go, okay, with this money, we could become the world leader in literally anything. Military industry, we could build that up. Manufacturing industry, we could build that up. Shipbuilding, we used to be the world's largest shipbuilding nation. The Norwegian trade flotilla was the 3rd largest in the world. Until we murdered all of it, and now it's South Korea's industry instead. And again, that is the issue we see in Africa, and a level of incompetence and or unwillingness to build up the industry required to actually see nations succeed. This is an endemic problem, again, not just to Africa, but to the West, to nations in general. And indeed, providing a limitless quantity of foreign aid is nothing more than a crutch that the local populace then become dependent upon. Why should you build your own business drilling wells, creating drilling equipment, producing the lubricant required in the drill machines, etc., etc., if some dude is just gonna arrive and put you out of business. Like, imagine if actually, okay, imagine the scenario. There is a drilling business making wells in Africa. He's created it, he's put his own money into it, he's gonna do this, and he's gonna make a living of it. He goes to a village and goes, okay, I'm gonna need, $10,000 to do this. And they go, okay, well, we need the water, so we're gonna have to pay you. And then MrBeast sweeps in and goes, hello, I'd like to build you that well for free. It's not exactly a good economic incentive then, is it, to actually get into the well drilling business in Africa? And again, this isn't just a MrBeast problem. As we said, there are dozens of these NGOs, to the point where I imagine that, articles like this does have a point that, if all of these wells are drilled for free by foreigners, what possible fucking reason would there ever be for an African to start drilling those wells himself? Well, even Arch can be wrong on occasion, it seems. That's a very amusing little article, this. Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.